We often play video game as a way to escape our reality sometimes. You know, by spending countless hours upon hours just having fun and messing around. But let's keep this rule between me and you. That doesn't really work nowadays. But with the thousands of games that have been released over the past few decades, there's bound to be some that just cross the line and goes against the rule of what we usually see on the surface. With one of the games I'm gonna be covering allowing us to take the role of a deranged psychopath Reddit user. Okay, I'm actually just kidding, so please let me live. Okay, maybe I'm just a tiny bit serious. But that's not even the worst part, because two of them is just straight up actually abusing a minor.
No new mummy or daddy will ever want you if you don't like that.
Oh god, I feel fucking sick. So join me as we're gonna be looking into the most controversial and disturbing game to ever be released. There's about 10 games on this list, and just a fair warning, the list is just gonna get more intense and more disturbing as we go further down this rabbit hole. I hope you have your snack ready, and let's start off with Kaboom, the suicide bombing game. Yep, you heard that right. Kaboom is a browser game that was released on the 17th of April 2002, where you basically play as the most stereotypical suicide bomber to ever exist, and your main goal is to take as many civilians down with you as possible. The player can move left or right through a Middle Eastern looking street where men, women, and children walks back and forth along the street at various speed. I don't know who came up with this game, but you are just evil. And when you click on the mouse, well, the man opens up his jacket, revealing an explosive belt, and detonates. Yup, that's pretty much just the game. Like, okay. The whole aim of the game is just to kill and ruin as many men and women as possible. And I just want to point out that originally, player could also kill and ruin children. However, this feature was later removed. The number of people, both killed and injured, is displayed after each time you've detonated. And David Welsh, who I still have no idea who that is. Wait, let me Google him. I need to find out who he is. David Welsh is an American psychologist. Well then, I guess that's all I need to know. Anyway, he stated that it was an example of tasteless game that numbed people to violence, which, to be fair, is pretty true. And in case you're wondering why this game was created in the first place, well, the creator reportedly got the idea to create the game after reading an article in Time about suicide bombers. He also planned to expand the game to include terrorism missions in 12 countries, but it was never expanded, which, thank God. But now let's move on to the next one, which is just wild. GTA San Andreas Hot Coffee mod. GTA San Andreas is probably the most iconic game in the whole franchise, but the Hot Coffee minigame is the reason why GTA San Andreas was given the AO rating by the ASRB after a sexually explicit minigame was found hidden in the game codebase, but it was later brought back down to a mature rating after Rockstar had to recall all copy of the game and re-release a version of the game that didn't contain the explicit content. This was the closest the game came to being taken off shelves permanently due to having an AO rating, because most gaming store doesn't sell adult only rating games, but a patch was released by Patrick Wildenberg after the game was launched for Windows. And the mod basically allowed our boy CJ to clap the cheeks of his in-game girlfriend in a pretty weird and funny animated way. And the mod was also downloaded over 1 million times over the span of 4 weeks, which is insane for the time. Which also pushed several retailers to remove the game off their shelf for as long as it remained an AO rating game. And in case you're wondering why he named it Hot Coffee, it's pretty much just before engaging in the unholy act, your girlfriend would invite you in for some coffee, and that's why he decided to name it the way that he did. But like I said, Rockstar had to recall all copy of the game and re-release a new version that had blocked all access to that type of content within the game. And the rating was put back down to mature, and it was put back on the shelves. Manhunt was developed by Rockstar North and published by Rockstar Game in 2003 for the PS2, and it's probably Rockstar's most controversial and gruesome game. I mean, don't get me wrong, the GTA franchise is pretty controversial too, but this one takes the cake. It was even banned in Australia, and in 2004, it was linked to the murder of 14-year-old Stephen Pekira in the UK. But Manhunt is a third-person stealth-action game in which you play as a death row inmate named James Earl Cash. The story opens with a female journalist reporting on the death of James Earl Cash, which should have supposedly been executed by lethal injection. However, it was revealed that Cash was only sedated and is still alive as you are awakened to the voice of a person coming from an earpiece who referred to himself as the Director. The Director promises Cash his freedom before the night is over in exchange of participating in his twisted game. Cash is then released in Kansas City, a place that is known for extreme levels of crime and violence, and Cash is instructed to slaughter his way through multiple different gangs throughout the city, also known as the Hunter, all whilst being watched and filmed through CCTV throughout the city by the Director for his fantasy snuff film. The first gang that you come across is the Herd, which consists of dangerous criminal and corrupted police officers. The Smileys, which is a bunch of sadistic individuals who wear clown masks and exhibit psychopathic behavior. Then there's the Skins, who are white supremacists, identifiable by their Nazi heads. The War Dog, which is a group of mercenary and ex-military personals, who is also responsible for the kidnapping of Cash's family. The Cerberus, which is the Director, personal bodyguard and security unit. And finally there's the Innocents, a gang that are devil worshippers and perverts, and is also involved in hideous crime like human trafficking and other messed up stuff. After retrieving a videotape, Cash witnesses a family member being slaughtered by the Innocents in order of the Director. Upon seeing this, Cash quest for survival quickly turned to vengeance. Cash is then hunted down in order to be recaptured by the War Dog led by Ramsey, who is a high-ranking member within the gang. He manages to survive by killing them and teams up with the journalist seen at the beginning of the game, exposing the Director's true identity being Lionel Starkweather. And while he's making his way towards Starkweather estate, he gets captured and almost executed by the SWAT team, and again is recaptured by the Cerberus. At this point, I've lost count of how many times this guy has been captured. But anyway, back at the Starkweather's mansion, you encounter Pixie, an insane chainsaw-wielding man who wears a pig head as a mask and was kept chained up in Starkweather's attic? Now, I'm starting to think this Lionel guy is more than just freaky. But Pixie manages to break free before slaughtering the investigating Cerberus members, which give Cash enough time to work his way through the garden and mansion. Upon reaching the upper level of the mansion, you found yourself being chased by Pixie. However, Cash manages to lure Pixie onto a trapdoor that collapses, and as Pixie tries to hold on, Cash chainsaws Piggy's hands off, ultimately causing Piggy to fall to his death. And in the final chapter, Cash finally meets Starkweather, and despite his plea, he brutally decapitates him with the chainsaw, and the game ends with the journalist exposing Starkweather's snuff ring and the police's involvement in Starkweather's operation, while Cash's fate remains unknown and is nowhere to be found. Hatred. Oh boy, this one is quite something, I can't lie. Hatred was released June 1st, 2015 by Disruptive Creations, and it's an isometric shooter, and it's probably one of the most gruesome games out there, where you play as a character who is a mass killer referred to as the antagonist, who begins a genocide crusade to kill as many human beings as possible, because he hates as well and a human womb feasting on his carcass. I don't know why, but I can definitely picture a Reddit user just writing everything down this character has done, and just thinking, you know what, this is normal, and just go on with his day. I'm sorry, but I really do. But anyway, in the game, you play as the antagonist, and the main objective is to go on a rampage and kill everyone you see in New York City. Not really with any real story, which makes it that much worse. And I should also point out that it was given the adults rating only by the ESRB. And it's also banned on Twitch because Twitch doesn't allow AO rating to be streamed on the platform. And like I mentioned previously, game with the AO rating isn't really sold in most retailer. It was even removed on the Steam Greenlight service due to extreme level of violence content. But it was brought back days later with a personal apology from Velvet boss Gabe Newell, stating, "Yesterday I heard that we were taking Hatred down from Greenlight. Since I wasn't up to speed, I asked around internally to find out why we had done that. It turned out it wasn't a good decision and we'll be putting Hatred back up. My apologies to you and your team." But really, this game is just boring because there's no real story to it. And most reviews I've seen is just people saying the game is just one controversial and shocking experience, which is probably the best way I could describe it. But now let's go deeper in this rabbit hole with Postal. Postal was released in 1997 and is much worse than Hatred because we're playing as the Postal dude who got evicted from his home, and he believed that the United States Air Force is releasing an airbound agent upon his town of Paradise, and he's the only one that isn't affected by what he calls the hate plague. We're basically in the mind of someone who clearly had mental health problems, which is why it's just that much worse. The game follows the same gameplay as Hatred as well, with the same isometric perspective, and decides to go on a rampage from his home till finally making it to an elementary school. The main objective of each level is to kill a certain number of enemies, referred to as hostile, so we can progress further in the game. Hostile range from police, SWAT team, and even unarmed civilians that the player have the choice of killing. And during the course of the gameplay, a voice in the protagonist's head can be heard taunting his victim after killing them, which is just really creepy. But in the final chapter of the game, you end up at an elementary school where the Postal dude attempts to massacre all the kids there. But despite his best efforts, his weapon will be ineffective against the children, and he eventually collapses and wakes up in a mental asylum, where you can see the Postal dude lying in a cell, straight jacket bound, suggesting that he was just truly insane all along, and hellish images will begin to cover the screen. This game is quite disturbing to say the least, and definitely deserves the title of being one of the most controversial and just honestly disturbing game of all time. But now let's move on to the next one, which is just as disturbing, or worse if I'm being honest. Prior Affair was released in 2013 and is a psychological horror game. It was originally a mod for the game Half-Life, but the standalone version was released due to its popularity. Our main character is 19 years old Simon, who wakes up in a dark alleyway shortly after being hit by a car. As Simon tries to make his way back home, this is where his journey takes a dark turn. He is attacked by a deformed, twitching man who's armed with a hammer. Simon stabs him to death and wonders who the man was. He tries to call the police but was unable to since there was no signal. After failing to call the police, Simon receives a text from an anonymous person who asks Simon for his help in the apartment. Upon making your way there, you come across various monsters that becomes more disturbing than the last one. First, there's children armed with knives, a woman whose arm and legs are replaced with spikes, and a ghostly woman who will use her influence to force Simon to shoot himself in the head unless Simon breaks out of it, just to name a few. After reaching the apartment, Simon finds the anonymous person dead in the bathtub, full of his own blood. A calm moment for Simon is when he meets Sophie, his childhood friend and love interest, standing on the edge of a rooftop. Simon confesses love to her, but she rejects him and commits suicide by jumping off the roof. Throughout the game, Simon will face a monster known as Carcass, giving him the choice to either kill it or flee from it, and he also has the choice to either keep his gun or give it to the doctor he encountered late in the game, where the ending will be determined based on the choices you've made throughout your journey. The final chapter ends with him finally reaching his house and expects his mother to be waiting for him, but the house is empty. He then enters his bedroom and finds a book on the chair, finding out that the entire story was just a product of his imagination. After the car crash, Simon had become reliant on a wheelchair and depressed. His therapist, who is the doctor in the game, advised him to write down his feeling in the book. Prior Affair features multiple endings and all of them is honestly quite dark. If Carcass wasn't killed but Simon did give his gun to the doctor, you'd see him succumb to his darkest thoughts by killing Sophie and then himself. In his final note, he apologized to his therapist and thanks him for his help, explaining that he killed Sophie so that he could have her all to himself since he never got over her rejection.
I had to end my life. And I had to take my special person with me. Sophie. I wanted to keep her with me. I wanted to keep her all for myself. I hope her body is rotting away when you find her. This is my conclusion. This is my end. Farewell, everyone.
But the darkest ending is if Carcass wasn't killed and you didn't give the gun to the doctor, it will result in Simon letting his demon win by killing Sophie, his doctor, and finally himself. And in his final note, he expresses how he wants his dead body to haunt those who find him forever.
They showed me that there was no one and nothing worth living for! They showed me how fake Sophie and my doctor were. So I had to kill Sophie and my doctor. My mentor, my counselor. I had to take them down with me. They're not laughing anymore. Oh, oh, I wish I could have taken everybody with me. But unfortunately, my situation makes that impossible. To whoever is reading this, I hope My dead body will haunt you forever. Have fun scraping my brains off the wall.
This game is honestly just dark and disturbing. There's no other way to describe it. Rule of Rose is a survival horror game, and it was released in 2006 by Punchline for the PS2 in Japan. And only a few months later, when the game was released in Europe, it came under fire due to its portrayal of violence and cruelty among children. And even some scene where one of the kids is clearly getting touched quite inappropriately by the headmaster.
Go on, tell me. Answer me, Diana. No new mummy or daddy will ever want you if you don't like that.
Rule of Rose is considered to be a cult classic nowadays, along with being one of the rarest games for the PS2, as it was banned in several countries, including England, where the story takes place. The story takes place inside our protagonist's head, Jennifer, as we discover the mental and emotional horror she went through in the past as a young girl. The game is not in a chronological order, so I'm going to try my best and tell the story without things getting too confusing and long. But the story of Jennifer starts in 1929, a few months before she entered the Rose Garden orphanage. At this point, Jennifer was traveling with her upper-class family on a luxurious airship. However, something tragic would happen, as the airship crashes, killing everyone on board but Jennifer, leaving her to be the sole survivor. After the crash, Jennifer is found by a poor pea farmer named Gregory Wilson. Wilson takes Jennifer back to his farmhouse, took care of her injuries and looks after her, but this is where our story takes a dark turn, because Gregory is unstable mentally because of the recent passing of his son named Joshua, who died of some sort of illness. After the death of his son, Wilson becomes an alcoholic and heavily depressed and suicidal, and he would often hold a gun to his head, contemplating taking his own life. But Wilson would develop a strange coping mechanism where he started calling Jennifer Joshua and dressed her up as his son used to, replacing Joshua mentally with Jennifer. He would become gradually more overprotective and eventually permanently locks Jennifer in the basement so he never loses his son again. And during all of this, Jennifer would repeatedly try to escape only to be unsuccessful till one day, a girl by the name of Wendy, who lived in an orphanage not too far from Gregory's house, discovered her through the basement window. The two would begin exchanging letters in secret, and they both developed feelings for each other. One day, Wendy was able to save Jennifer from Wilson's basement and take her to live at the Rose Garden orphanage. At the start of her time in the orphanage, Jennifer and Wendy grew closer each day, till eventually promising each other everlasting true love. Wendy will then introduce her to the Aristocrat Club and makes her a member, as Wendy is a founder and leader of the club. Sometime later, Jennifer discovers a lonely puppy abandoned in a shed near the orphanage, and she adopts him and names him Brown, and the two will become inseparable friends. Upon seeing the love and affection Jennifer had for Brown, she becomes very jealous, as all she ever wanted was to have Jennifer all to herself. But Jennifer did not want to get rid of her friend, and this angered Wendy, causing her to demand all of the aristocrats to bully and harass Jennifer, so she would eventually forget Brown and return to her side. But this fails, so she goes on to do the worst thing possible by killing Brown. After seeing the murder of her friend, Jennifer finally decided she had enough and stand up to Wendy's bullying for the first time.
My friend! Give me back my friend! Liar! Go away! Just go away! I'll never forgive you.
After this, Wendy runs away from the orphanage, only to plot up her revenge. Wendy goes on to abuse the mental state of Gregory by dressing up as Joshua and trains him to behave like a stray dog, and bring him to the orphanage with the intention to terrify Jennifer. But with how unstable Wilson is, this doesn't go according to plan. He goes on to slaughter the entire orphanage. Realizing the state of Wilson, Wendy gives a gun to Jennifer so he could put Wilson down. before killing Wendy herself. But Wilson snaps out of it and still thinks Jennifer is his son Joshua. Jennifer then places the gun in Wilson's hand, and upon realizing what he's done to the orphanage, Wilson said he's sorry Joshua and shoot himself in the head, leaving Jennifer to be the sole survivor once more. The story of the game is probably one of the best one I've ever seen in any game, but one of the most controversial things I didn't talk about in the story is the disturbing relationship between Hoffman, the headmaster, and some of the orphans. There's at least two cases that we know of, first one being Clara and the other one being Diana, where Hoffman exploited his guardianship, abused him for his own twisted desires. Clara stands out as a prime example of Hoffman's sexual misconduct betrayed in the game. She is around 15 or 16 at the time, and before Diana, she was known to be Hoffman's favorite. The game repeatedly shows Clara's body language evokes feelings of shame, anxiety, and fear when we try to talk to her. In that chapter, the clover fell. If Jennifer tries to open the drawer in the sickbay of the airship, Clara will rush to Jennifer and stop her, most likely hiding evidence of Hoffman's mistreatment of her, while Hoffman just nods in silent agreement. In a later chapter, we see Hoffman and Clara going alone in a room, where we can see him caressing her feet as if she's suffering from abdominal pain, hinting at she might have been pregnant at some point. In the game, Wolf is the mermaid princess boss, which show how Jennifer's young mind made sense of what was happening between Clara and Hoffman. One of the main attacks of Clara is an acid vomit, again hinting at morning sickness as a symptom of unwanted pregnancy. We can also see a large scar on her lower abdomen, which made a lot of people think Clara must have had an abortion at some point through C-section. In another scene, we can see Clara on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor as Hoffman talks to her in a disgusting and sexual tone.
Look, there's some dust over here.
But anyway, I think you get the idea of the disgusting relationship between the two, so now let's move on to the next one. JFK Reloaded. Oh boy, here we go. So JFK Reloaded is a first-person shooter that was released in 2004 and faced backlash upon its release, and even prompting a comment from David Smith, a spokesman for Ted Kennedy, who called it despicable. The game aimed to simulate the assassination of US President John F. Kennedy, which allows the player to recreate the tragic event of the 1963 assassination from the perspective of Lee Harvey Oswald. The game also featured a detailed physics engine that was designed to realistically recreate the reaction of the president and the other individual in the motorcade when hit by bullets. The developer Eric stated that the intention of the game was to prove that Lee acted alone in the assassination. Ethnic cleansing have to be one of the most controversial and racist game I've ever come across while researching for the game on this list. And honestly, it's pretty self-explanatory because of the name, so I'm gonna try and make it quick because fuck this game. Ethnic Cleansing is a 2002 first-person shooter produced by the National Alliance. The player can play as 3 offensive playable characters, which I can't say on YouTube because it just might get blocked everywhere. And the main goal is to kill stereotypical African, Latinos, and Jewish enemy, and is said to be one of the most incorrect political games to ever be released. The game was outright banned on streaming platforms like Twitch and YouTube, and was never sold on a digital platform, so it's safe to assume that it was never on a shelf in a gaming store. Or at least I would hope so. I hope it really wasn't. Out of all the games on this list, this is hands down the worst one on here.
Does a video game go too far? A Japanese video game titled Rlay has caused international controversy. The purpose of the game is to approach a teenage girl on a subway platform. The game even allows you to impregnate a girl and urge her to have an abortion.
But Rlay is a 3D Europe game released on April 26, 2006 by Illusion in Japan, and the story starts off with Masayo Kamura getting arrested for assaulting a woman, but he's quickly released as he got help from his dad, a well-known influential politician, and seeks revenge on 17-year-old Aoi who reported him. And as the game progresses, he decides to target Aoi's mother, 42-year-old Yuko, and her younger sister, 12-year-old Manaka. After Masayo stalks Manaka onto a train, you can use your hand to control his hands, where you can touch different parts of the girl while filling up the arousal meter, until it gets a lot worse since Monica loses piece of her clothes after enough cursor movement, and after leaving the train at the next stop, he traps Monica in a public bathroom and take picture of her naked body. The game flow is similar gameplay to eventually capture all 3 women, and with all 3 captured, Masaya reveals his plan to make them his. Despite the mother Yuko desperate pleas to spare her daughter in exchange of her compliance, Masaya revealed that he will never change his mind and that they are all there to stay, and they all break down in the end. The game have 2 possible endings, but regardless of the ending achieved, it results in Masaya's death. The black ending, as it's called, ends with Masaya impregnating one of the 3 women and decides to keep the child. But a few days later, Masaya is at a subway station where he falls onto the train tracks and is killed by a moving train. And the red ending ends with Oru stabbing Masaya to death while hysterically laughing, and the game ends with Oru being questioned by the police for Masaya's death. But despite the game being horrible and honestly just disgusting, there's been several articles defending it, stating that it is considered a lesser crime than murder. Then why are there games that allows the protagonist to murder his enemy? The fact that there are people who think like this, like Rlay, is just disgusting, and it just made me sick. But anyway, enough of the game. If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Take care.